What's going on, everyone? So the Los Angeles Lakers are linked to a potential Chris Paul trade. There is a big 5-team deal that is rumored to be in the works. There was reports earlier yesterday that it could even be close to being done. But obviously with 5 teams, there is a lot of kind of moving parts, a lot of teams that want to feel like they won and whatnot. So a lot of chaos. It could take up till the trade deadline for it to actually get done. It all kind of centers around the San Antonio Spurs acquiring De'Aaron Fox, and you have teams like the Brooklyn Nets, the Sacramento Kings, obviously, the San Antonio Spurs, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Atlanta Hawks. Indiana might get in the mix of it. There's talks about like Nick Claxton potentially going there, and the Lakers acquiring Miles Turner, right? Like there's a lot of potential, a lot of options there to explore in that regard. We'll see what ends up happening, what ends up brewing. However, there is a lot of talk about in that deal, the Lakers potentially landing Chris Paul. Now, I'm not against Chris Paul at all. I would love to get Chris Paul, but he's kind of the last thing the Lakers need, right? Like, I understand the Lakers really want another playmaker. They really want another kind of facilitator that can kind of take pressure off of LeBron, take pressure off of Austin Reeves, especially with Reeves at times really struggling with ball pressure. So I do get the idea of like, hey, bringing in a guy like Chris Paul who could really make some noise. But here's the thing. Chris Paul went to the Spurs rather than going to a contender because he wanted to play. He wanted to start, which is what he's doing, right? He wanted to play as much as possible. So he basically chose a destination to where he could get a real opportunity to play the most minutes rather than like going to a contender and getting spot minutes and stuff like that on a contending team, right? So that's why he chose that. Well, if the Spurs go and trade for De'Aaron Fox, then Chris Paul now, how many minutes is he going to get? I mean, De'Aaron Fox probably playing 35 minutes at the point guard position. They have Trey Jones, right? So does Trey Jones just not play at all, or does he get included in some deal? Like he ends up going somewhere or getting landed somewhere. And then now the Lakers, or now the Spurs, right, like are playing Chris Paul 10, 15 minutes, something like that. But then if that's the case, then I could see him being like, well, then I might as well go to a place that I want to go to, right? Now, my problem with the Lakers trading for Chris Paul, because he's still been really good. He's been very good this year for the Spurs. And I'll go over the numbers here in a moment. But the problem with trading for Chris Paul is he's making $10 million, a little over $10 million, right? Which isn't a lot. Like you could easily do. I mean, you could swap Gabe Vincent for Chris Paul if you wanted to. But my issue is that $10 million for Chris Paul could be allocated elsewhere to get a more impactful piece, right? There's talks about, Bogdan Bogdanovic and Clint Capella. Like those two guys could end up making their way to the Lakers, right? I'd rather that than Chris Paul because then you get like a shooter, a guy that can give you, 15 to 18 points on any given night, right? Like, and then also playoff ball, slot alongside LeBron and AD makes some sense. A guy in Clint Capella gives you that interior presence, a guy that can still block shots, rebound, still one of the better offensive rebounders in the league, right? Like, I'd rather that than like Chris Paul and like a Clint Capella or something like that, right? Like, I like Chris Paul and the impact and him running the second unit, and then you always have like a Chris Paul and LeBron on the team. I mean, look, Chris Paul has been linked to the Lakers for years. I mean, dating back to Kobe, right? The Vito trade, right? And we've talked about Chris Paul, last season, the year before that, right? Like Chris Paul makes a ton of sense for the Lakers as just like his basketball mind, a guy that can be a true playmaker, be a true point guard, a guy that you can trust down the stretch in games, in the playoffs, a guy that, like I would rather have Chris Paul have the ball in a playoff game tied with, a minute left than Austin Reeves as your point guard with a minute left, right? Because again, Austin Reeves doesn't handle ball pressure well. I'm not saying you don't have Austin Reeves on the court. I'm just saying I trust Chris Paul to bring the ball up and get you into your actions. And he has like a 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio this year. I mean, the guy's still every bit a true playmaker, a true point guard, right? And if you could get, a Clint Capella and a Bogdan Bogdanovic and all these other guys. Problem is you wouldn't be able to get all three unless you traded a Max Christie or Jared Vanderbilt, which I don't really think the Lakers are going to do. So how do you get Chris Paul? Like, I don't want to see the Lakers trade for Chris Paul just to trade for Chris Paul, right? But what I can see happening is the Lakers go and trade for a Bogdan Bogdanovic and a Clint Capella. They bring those two guys in, and then you see the Lakers wait, be patient, And I think Chris Paul will request the buyout. I believe the Spurs will give him that buyout because they got De'Aaron Fox now, and they have Trey Jones as their backup point guard, right? So they're not in a position where it's like, well, if we let Chris Paul go, then we, right? And again, Chris Paul went there for very specific circumstances, right? He went there so he could play. So now if he's coming off the bench and only getting 15 minutes a night, he'd probably rather go to a place that he wants to go play with your buddy LeBron, try to win an NBA championship, right? Like if you told me at the end of this trade deadline, this year we got Clint Capella, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Dorian Finney-Smith, and then Chris Paul off a buyout, that's great, right? And we'd be able to get Chris Paul, because keep in mind, Lakers are a first April team. They cannot sign anybody off of a buyout making more than the mid-level exception. Chris Paul is making under the mid-level exception. So basically anyone making over like $13 million roughly, the Lakers wouldn't be able to sign via buyout. So, but again, Chris Paul is not one of those guys. Chris Paul is making a little over $10 million, so you could easily do that. Also, Chris Paul is an expiring contract, so that's $10 million that would fall off your books if you were to trade for him. So I do understand that idea, but again, I'd rather wait for a buyout, get him on a vet minimum. They'll probably pay him the $10 million or whatever. He can come to the Lakers on the buyout. We would need him, especially if we traded Gabe Vincent. He would literally be our primary backup point guard and probably would play 20 minutes a game. Right? So he'd probably get the playing time. He just wouldn't get the starting role, right? Because you don't want to, last thing you want is Chris Paul and Austin Reeves as your starting backcourt, right? I mean, I mean, maybe if you had like Dorian Finney, could you do like Chris Paul, Austin Reeves, Dorian Finney-Smith, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis? I wouldn't mind that unit out there at times, right? But I really worry about defensively. I mean, Chris Paul still tries, right? He still gets after it on the defensive side, but he's not the Clippers, Chris Paul or anything like that where, he's really like, a better defensive point guard. But as far as Chris Paul and what he's doing this year, again, we'll see what ends up happening. And if the Lakers end up actually landing him, hopefully via buyout, not via trade. But you look at this year. So far, he's played in 44 games for the Spurs. He's averaging just under 30 minutes per game, 29 minutes per game. He is shooting 41.5% from the floor on 7.5 attempts, which is also down attempt-wise from last year by 0.6. But his field goal percentage overall is down. But he's shooting 36% from three-point range on 4.8 attempts. And he's shooting 51.7% from two-point range on 2.7 attempts. He has an EFG of 53%. He's shooting 97% from the foul line this year on 1.5 attempts. Rebounding. He's still giving you 4 rebounds per game. He's a career 4.5 rebound. He's averaging 4.1. He's still giving you 8.2 assists, 1.3 steals. So guy, again, who still give you steals, will be nice to round up to half a block and 9.4 points. So he's literally a 9, 8, and 4 guy right now for the San Antonio Spurs in almost 30 minutes a game. I don't believe he'll be that for the Lakers in 20 minutes a game, but could he be like a 8 and 5 guy off the bench in 20 minutes a night, right? Like, that's fine, right? And he's playmaking, and he's wheeling and dealing, and he's being that playmaker, and if he could get you a steal a night, right? And just kind of, again, it's more so about just, you think about like the 2020 run, for example. We had like Rondo, right? And Rondo was so impactful, particularly come playoff time. I mean, he hardly played during the regular season, but playoff Rondo laced them up, and all of a sudden, you saw what the result was. So to me, I like the idea of bringing in a Chris Paul as like that, our Rajon Rondo of this year, a guy that just is a veteran that has been there, done that, been to a finals, has been on multiple playoff runs, multiple playoff stretches, right? Basketball IQ is still there. The playmaking still there. Assist turnover ratio is still there, right? Like all the things you want to see from a guy like a Chris Paul are all still there. So if the Lakers could add that, then beautiful. I just don't like the idea of adding that through a trade, right? Because again, I just think that $10 million could be allocated elsewhere. So again, this season, as far as turnovers go, he's averaging 1.6 turnovers. But again, that's to 8.2 assists. So he has basically a 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, right? That's really good. And so, especially with the Lakers and how much they turn the ball over, it'd be nice to have that guy that you could put out there, run a unit, put him alongside a bunch of shooters and like Anthony Davis, or if we get a Clint Capella, right? Say you get a Bogdanovich and a Clint Capella, right? You could have like Chris Paul out there with a couple shooters, and just let him kind of create and do his thing. Have like a Clint Capella as that lob threat, right? Like have a Dorian Finney-Smith, and so you could do like, Chris Paul, Bogdanovich, Dorian Finney-Smith, Clint Capella, and even Anthony Davis, right? Have the two bigs down low to help out there, and then Chris Paul has the lob threat, has the kick out guys, and Bogdanovich, or Dalton Connect or whomever, right? You can see the vision, you could see what could be and what could become. I don't want the Lakers to trade for him. Right? If you can get him off a buyout, beautiful, chef kiss. Let's go, let's get it. But to trade for him, personally, I don't want to see that happen. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel with your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Kind of mix in the middle? Do you think stay away from Chris Paul no matter what? Do you think no, go trade for Chris Paul? Do you think no, don't trade for Chris Paul? Like you said, Tyler, just if it's off of a buyout, sure, beautiful, bring him in off of a buyout. However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it out of the way, so let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Lets me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.